Okay, so let's talk about these three things: the initialization, the condition, and the update. What if I leave one of them out? Technically, Java will let me leave that out. So I just took out the update for my variable. So now each time the block of code here runs, and when I say block of code, we can have 5 lines in there if we want. In this case, we're just using 1 line. Okay, but each time this runs, it's going to come back around, and it's not going to change I. So what's going to happen? And you can see my application is still running. It's going wild over here. It's running, and 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 is all that keeps coming out, right? What I've done is I've created an infinite loop. The problem here is, now when that happens, there's a little red stop button right here beside the output window that we can hit stop and stop our loop. We had to crash our program basically to get it to stop. So what happened? Well, since we didn't update I stayed at 10, the condition never became false. I was always greater than or equal to 0. So this loop never stopped. And the rest of our program was never allowed to execute. We can look down here, there's 10s going on. And then finally, you can see where I stopped it manually. There's a lot of 10s going on there. So we have to have an update expression in every loop. There has to be something that changes to make sure our condition isn't always true. If our condition never changes to false, we get stuck in an infinite loop and it will keep running. Now, I don't necessarily have to stick update here. I could update I down here. Let me do I minus minus. I'll put the update here instead of in the for loop. So this whole block of code will repeat, but now I am updating I, so it should still get smaller every time. See what happens? And it worked. Okay. I could also put I before the statement. And you'll see this time we started at 9 and went down to -1. Well, why is that? Right? Because when our condition tested at 0 was greater than or equal to 0, I subtracted -1 and then printed it out. So putting the update inside our loop on a for loop is not always necessarily a good thing. We can get some unexpected results. So it's better to keep it where it belongs, which is right there. All right. What about our initialization? I'm going to save that one for last. Let's talk about our condition. What if I put less than or equal to 0 for my condition? What do you think is going to happen? When I hit run, I get countdown, and then I get blast off. What happened to the countdown? Well, let's think about it. We started I equal to 10. Then our condition says, basically, while I is less than or equal to 0. Well, 10 is not less than or equal to 0. So that was false. So it never executed the block of code. The minute this tests false, it jumps down and executes the next line. So our condition can't, we need to be careful about our condition. Here's another one. Greater than or equal to 0. So often we count up in these loops. I++, what's going to happen here? Oh, look at I climbing. We're in the 100,000s now. And I'm stuck in an infinite loop. So I'm going to stop it right there. What happened? Well, we started I at 10. And we said keep counting as long as I is greater than or equal to 0. And I accidentally, on purpose, made I go up instead of down. Because I kept going up, it's always going to be greater than or equal to 0. And we're in another infinite loop. So we need to think carefully about our conditions and our updates. Lastly, let's talk about init. But before I do that, I want to come down here, and right before we hit blast off, I told you that when this loop runs, the last time through, we go through it, I equal to 0, right? And I equals 0, it comes back up here. This was supposed to be minus minus. I equals 0. We come back up, it subtracts 1. I becomes negative 1. And now the condition is false and the loop ends. So after our loop body ends here, I go down here and I try to print I. Now what's wrong? I've got a red mark that says I don't know what I is. If you hover over it, cannot find symbol. I can't find the variable I. I don't know what I is. So we've talked about scope a little bit in the past. The place where we declare a variable determines its scope. And in this case, I was declared in this for loop. And the minute the loop ended at its closing curly brace, I no longer existed. So I can't print out I to show you that it went to negative 1. Because I was declared within this for loop. And it was declared right here. So for my initialization, what if I took it out of here? And put it here instead. And I forgot my semicolon. Okay. So my initialization is no longer here inside my for loop. It actually started before the for loop. I'm declaring I inside the main method, which starts here and ends here, which means now it says I can print I. So let's do it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then here, actually, let me do this. I'll print final. So we can see that it's actually happening right here. We'll run it again. So the final value of I was negative 1. I can use negative I outside the loop now because I declared it before the loop started. So its scope is larger now. Its scope is inside of this method from the time I declared it until the method ended at that last curly brace. So this proves to you that I did become negative 1 to end the loop. This became false. It jumped down here, ran this statement, and printed out final equals negative 1 for us, and then it did blast off. So I can technically initialize a variable outside of the loop. Okay. Now, is that good form? Probably not, unless there's a really valid reason to do it. And we'll talk about some of those reasons later. I got too many semicolons in there now. Okay. So generally, we always do a for loop like this. Initialize the variable, state the condition, how long do we want the loop to run, and then how do we want to update the variable so that at some point the condition becomes false. And again, I can't use I outside of the for loop, so that won't work. And we're back to working. All right, I talked about scope. We talked about infinite loops. Let's do another example. Actually, I'm going to save this example for the next video. I'm going to break it into one more video. So I'll see you in the next video.